Hello and Happy New Year! My name is Diane and today I want to talk about all the books I read in December, the Readathon I participated in, and also my January TBR. In December I finished reading 14 books. I also participated in the Bright and Merry-a-thon, which was hosted by Sarah from the channel Bright and Bookish. The Readathon is basically a board game. You read books, see what prompts they fulfill, and that allows you to move around a board. You collect sets of tokens. I thought this was a lot of fun. I really like board games. I also like that I didn't feel like I had to create a specific TBR that catered to a list of prompts. That's why I typically don't like readathons, because I feel like I have to come up with other books that aren't already on my TBR, and I want a readathon that's going to help me get through my TBR faster, not make my TBR longer. So I had a lot of fun participating in this, and it made getting through. A lot of these are Christmas books, which I've already talked about, so I'm not going to talk too much about any of these books. But I read 24 Christmas books for the month of December and reviewed all of them, and by the end I was pretty burnt out on Christmas books. I don't think I'll ever do this again, although I did find a few gems in the whole bunch. So let me tell you what I read and also show you how I progressed around the board while I was reading. The first book I finished in December was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. This was one of my favorite reads of the year, and for the readathon this allowed me to finish all of Host a Christmas Eve Party as well as start Decorate the Tree. The next book I finished was The Christmas Wedding Guest. This let me get a little bit more of Decorate the Tree, but I didn't finish any sets from this one. Then I finished 12 Days of Christmas, which let me finish Decorate the Tree as well as start Bake Cookies. Then I read The Christmas Mystery, which let me finish Bake Cookies. Then I read A Christmas Escape, and that let me start Serve Christmas Dinner. Then I read A Christmas Carol Murder, which let me finish Serve Christmas Dinner as well as start Deck the Halls. Then I read I'll Be Home for Christmas, which let me get a little bit more of Deck the Halls. With Starry Night, I finished Deck the Halls and started Wrap the Presents. Then for the big finish, One Snowy Night let me finish Wrap the Presents as well as get all of Go Skating. And for me, this was about the middle of the month. I finished the whole board. I obviously got through a lot of books very early on in the month. I was trying to finish these Christmas books, and this readathon made doing that a lot more fun for me, because at this point I was getting a little burnt out on Christmas reads, but I still wasn't done yet. So after I finished this readathon, I went on to read The Christmas Train, The Christmas Wedding, and Always in December, and that wrapped up my Christmas reads. Again, I've already talked about all of these. I'll link those videos below if you want to hear more about any of them, but I don't know if anyone's really reading Christmas books anymore at this point. Then after that, I took a little break from reading. I had gone through a lot of books in a very short amount of time, so needed a little break, get ready for the holidays, spend some time with family. And then after that, I read The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. This is the sequel to Six Crimson Cranes. And I liked this, but I didn't like it as much as Six Crimson Cranes. I really think if I had just read Six Crimson Cranes and then if you just kind of cut it off at the ending where they set up the second book, I think that tells a pretty complete story on its own. And then this book, I think, did a similar thing where it started off with the dragon characters and you get a little bit of that, and I thought we would get more of that because it's called The Dragon's Promise, but it kind of just felt like we would go through a full arc and then there'd be a good stopping point and then things would wrap up nicely and then the next thing would start. And I think I would have liked this better if things had overlapped a little bit more instead of one thing starting and then coming to a close and then the next point in the story starting and then coming to a close, because we went through like 3 or 4 points where I was like, is it over? Is this the end? And there'd still be a ton of book left. And I just think it didn't keep me pushing forward through the story. I just kept feeling like, oh, everything's done now. And then something the next point in the story would start up. I'm like, okay, guess we're still going. Which is kind of a bummer because I do think this is a fun story. It had a lot of cool things in it. I did enjoy it. I just didn't enjoy it as much as the first book. Then after that, I read The Demon in the Wood graphic novel by Leigh Bardugo and Danny Pendergast. This tells the story of the Darkling from, what's the series called? The Grisha trilogy. I can't remember the name of the series, but the original Grisha trilogy. This tells the Darkling before he was the Darkling, kind of what his life looked like, living life on the run as a Grisha, not being able to expose who he was or what his powers were, and sort of his origin story, I guess. I really enjoyed this. It's a pretty short, contained story to a specific part of his life. It doesn't cover too much leading up to how he became who he was, but kind of the beginnings of that. And I really loved the artwork. I thought it was really beautiful artwork. And it's just really cool to see. I read that series ages ago, and it's just cool to see characters that you've known for a really long time brought to life on the page and have a visual representation of them. And I just thought it was a good story overall. So this was a great read to end the year with. That was my final read of 2022. So that was the end of a very good reading year for me. I ended the year at 119 books. I liked the majority of what I read, and I'm hoping to keep that going moving forward into this year. I don't know if I'll read that many books, but I'm hoping to keep reading things that I really enjoy and series that I actually want to finish. So for January, I made my TBR with some fantasy books that have been on my shelves for a while, some series that I've been trying to finish up before I start any new series, and also just some other books that have been on my radar recently. First book on this list is Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is, I don't think related at all story-wise, but comes next within the world that the duology, the Clocktor Wars, took place in. And I read that series last year and really loved it. So hopefully Sword Heart is also as good. I think as you get more into the world, it gets a little more romance leading, so I'm not sure how that'll play out for me. But so far I've really liked T. Kingfisher's writing. I really like her fantasy stories. And I'm looking forward to this one. The next book is Rule of Wolves by Leigh Bardugo. This is the sequel to King of Scars, which is the Nikolai duology. I was kind of disappointed in that one, but I'm still curious to where it's going to end, and since it's only a duology, I do want to finish it up. It's been a while since I've read that, but it just wasn't as Nikolai-centered as I would have expected, being the Nikolai duology, but I do like the other characters in it. So hopefully the second book is better for me than the first one was. The next book is The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, the sequel to The Name of the Wind. I started this book so long ago. I want to say I've read 200 pages of it already. It still feels pretty fresh in my mind, but it's on my shelves, so I haven't prioritized it. I tend to do that. If I buy a book that I haven't read, I feel like I can read it whenever. And so I just never finish it. I was really enjoying this. I just kind of set it down for a little bit to read other things and never picked it back up. So I'd really like to finish it. And I can await the third book with everyone else, because right now I feel like I'm not there yet. I don't care that it's not out because I'm still trying to read the second book. Then I have The Vagrant by Peter Newman. This has also been on my shelf for an incredibly long time. I read the beginning of it and liked it, but wasn't really in the mood for the type of story it was. So I set it down and just never picked it back up, but still really want to read it. So hopefully this month I can finally finish that book and not just be currently reading it forever. The next book is A Clash of Kings by George R. R. Martin. This is the second book in A Song of Ice and Fire, and I loved A Game of Thrones that I read last year, so I've been really excited to continue on with the series. I've actually already started this book. I'm about a third of the way through it right now. Hopefully we'll finish it this weekend so I can move on to the rest of this TBR. But I am having a lot of fun with this series. Then I have a long way to A Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I read The Monk and Robot duology last year, and while I don't think I liked it as much as a lot of other people did, it seemed like a real standout for a lot of people who read it. I did like it, so I'm interested to see what type of other stories she's done. And I have The Bear and the Nightingale. I don't honestly know a ton about this. It just seems very wintry. I've heard good things about it from what I have heard about it, but I really have no idea what it's about, and I'm okay with that. I was going through my general TBR this morning and I realized a lot of the books on it, I could not tell you what they're about, but I'm really excited to read all of them, and I don't know if that's like a weird thing, but I don't know, some books just really call to you even if you have no clue what they're about. Some of them I didn't even know what genre they were, so maybe it's a good thing I cleaned that list up today. And the final fiction book I have on here is The Unspoken Name. This is another one that I honestly don't know anything about, but it sounded interesting when I added it to my TBR. The cover's so cool and it sounds cool, but I couldn't summarize it for you. I have no idea what I'm getting into. Hopefully it's really good though. So those are the 8 fiction books I'm planning on reading this month. I also have a few nonfiction. I own a bunch of nonfiction that I've been very slowly making my way through that collection on my shelves. I'm hoping to get through the rest of my nonfiction this year, hopefully kind of early on, but I do have a fair few nonfiction books, and they are much slower reads than like a high-stakes fantasy, at least for me. So those are all the books on my TBR for January. I do have some other priority reads on my general TBR that if I do finish all of these early, I'm gonna try and get through, but I'm trying to keep it at least somewhat manageable. I want to be able to finish my TBRs and not just keep making them and abandoning them as I tend to do. Try as I might to schedule my reading so I can get through all the books I want to get through. It usually doesn't work out that way. I kind of just read whatever, whenever. So that's it for me today. Hopefully you ended 2022 with some good reads and are starting off this year with some even better ones. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.